The twin suns of Horizon 3 shone brightly over the colony, casting long shadows over the vast fields and towering white buildings. It was a peaceful day. Children played in the parks. Traders sold their goods, and workers moved between factories. It was a normal day, just like any other. Until the sky turned black. Without warning, massive warships appeared above the colony, blocking out the suns. The ships were jagged, covered in dark metal, with glowing red engines humming ominously. The HFY Dominion had arrived. The alarm blared across the city. Emergency alert. Unknown vessels detected. All citizens, evacuate immediately. Governor Elias Grayson stood in the command center, his face pale as he watched the giant ships on the screen. "Try to communicate," he ordered. "We are a peaceful colony. We have no weapons." The radio operator frantically sent out messages, but there was no response. Only silence. Then the first explosion shook the ground. Missiles rained from the sky, slamming into the colony's defenses. The shield generators overloaded and failed in seconds. The city was exposed. The people had nowhere to hide. The HFY warriors landed in large insect-like drop pods. They were tall, armored creatures with sharp claws and cold, glowing eyes. They moved without hesitation, without mercy. They did not ask for surrender. They did not take prisoners. Buildings collapsed under the relentless bombardment. Fire spread through the streets. Families ran, screaming, as the HFY soldiers advanced, weapons glowing with deadly energy. The humans fought back with whatever they had, security teams with rifles, workers with tools, even desperate colonists throwing rocks. But it wasn't enough. Elias watched in horror as the colony fell apart. "Send a distress signal to Earth," he said, his voice shaking. "Someone has to know what happened here." The signal was sent, a desperate message, a final plea for help. But Earth was too far. No help would come in time. The governor turned to his last remaining officers. "We have to get the children to the underground bunker." He led a small group through the burning city, dodging falling debris and enemy patrols. He could hear the screams of his people, the explosions, the alien voices speaking in their strange, guttural language. Finally, they'd reached the hidden bunker beneath the administration building. The thick steel doors slid open, and inside were 30 children, huddled together in fear, along with a few teachers and medics. Elias knelt down, his eyes filled with sorrow. "Stay quiet. Stay strong." He stepped back and sealed the doors. The bunker was deep underground. Maybe, just maybe, the HFY wouldn't find it. Then, an explosion tore through the building. The aliens had found them. Elias stood in the wreckage, staring at the burning sky. This was the end. The last thing he saw was the HFY warlord standing before him, eyes glowing with cruel satisfaction. Then, darkness. Horizon 3 was gone. A single survivor. Days later, a small Terran recon ship arrived at the colony's coordinates, responding to the distress signal. Commander Sarah Voss stood at the viewport, staring at the ruins below. Not a single building was left standing. The once beautiful colony was now a graveyard. The landing team moved carefully through the wreckage. The smell of smoke and burned metal filled the air. There were no signs of life, just ashes and silence. Then, a weak signal pinged on their scanners. "Sir, I found something," a soldier called. Beneath a collapsed shelter, they found a man barely clinging to life. His clothes were torn, his face covered in blood and dirt. His breathing was shallow, but his eyes flickered open. It was a survivor. The medics rushed forward, stabilizing him. Sarah knelt beside him, gently gripping his hand. "You're safe now," she whispered. "What happened here?" The man coughed, struggling to speak. Then, with the last of his strength, he whispered 2 words. "Avenge us." And then he was gone. Sarah clenched her fists, her jaw tightening. She turned to her crew. "Send a message to Earth. Tell them what happened." She looked up at the sky, where the HFY ships had vanished into the void. They think they won. They have no idea what they've just done. The message from Horizon 3 reached ear 3 days after the attack. By then, there was nothing left to save. The colony was gone. Its people were dead. In the heart of the United Terran Federation, UTF, headquarters, high-ranking officials, military leaders, and the President of Earth sat in stunned silence as the holographic images played before them. Burned cities, crushed buildings, charred bodies, and then the final transmission from the last survivor. Avenge us. The room was cold and quiet, except for the steady hum of the holoprojectors. President Elena Carter took a slow, deep breath. She had led humanity through difficult times before, but never had she felt this level of rage boiling inside her. She turned to Admiral Thomas Graves, the supreme commander of the Terran fleet. How many people were in that colony? Graves clenched his fists. 50,000, Madam President. His voice was hard, controlled. Men, women, and children. All gone. A murmur spread across the room. Some whispered in shock, others in anger. But one thing was clear. This was no accident. This was a massacre. The HFY Dominion has broken every law of war, Carter said, her voice filled with cold fury. They believe we will let this pass. General Marcus Reed, head of the UTF Army, leaned forward. Then we show them they are wrong. The council erupted in arguments. Some called for immediate retaliation. Others hesitated. The HFY were a powerful empire, feared across the galaxy. Could humanity really stand against them? Carter raised a hand, silencing the room. We will not rush into war blindly, she said. The HFY expect us to respond with anger. They think we will send ships and die in a pointless battle. We will not play their game. She turned to Admiral Graves. Disappear. The room fell silent again. Graves gave a slow, understanding nod. Understood, Madam President. Within the next 24 hours, every human colony, outpost, and military fleet vanished from known space. Communications went dark. Space stations shut down. Humanity had gone silent. The galaxy watched in confusion. And the HFY. They laughed. The first disappearances. 2 weeks later, the HFY warlords gathered in their grand war chamber, deep within the capital world of Drakenval. The halls were dark, lit only by glowing red banners and holographic war maps. The supreme warlord, Valkyris the Unbreakable, stood before his generals, a cruel smirk on his face. The humans are weak, he declared, his voice filled with amusement. We destroyed their colony, and they have done nothing. They hide in fear, just as I expected. The warlords laughed, their clawed hands tapping against the stone table. One of them, General Korvek, leaned forward. Then why have we lost contact with 3 of our outer posts? Valkyris frowned. What do you mean? Korvek brought up a holographic display. 3 listening stations in Sector 12 have gone silent. No distress signals, no reports. Just gone. Valkyris waved a hand dismissively. Pirates, perhaps. Korvek's claws tapped against the table. Perhaps. But last night, an entire fleet escorting supplies to the front line also disappeared. 20 warships wiped from existence. The room grew quiet. Another warlord spoke, and 2 days ago, my brother's command post on Velkaprime was attacked. No alarms were triggered, no survivors. Only a single message was left behind. A glowing hologram appeared in the air. 2 words written in blood. For Horizon. For the first time, the warlords of the HFY felt something unfamiliar. Fear, shadows in the dark. Across the galaxy, the silent war had begun. The Ghost Fleet, humanity's most advanced armada, operated in the shadows. Their ships were equipped with cloaking technology, making them invisible to enemy sensors. They struck fast, and without warning. Zelfar supply lines were cut, their communications hacked, their outposts destroyed in the dead of night. The UTF's blackout squads, elite cyber-enhanced soldiers, infiltrated enemy bases, eliminating targets with surgical precision. They left no bodies behind, only messages, written in blood, burned into walls, or broadcast on emergency channels. For Horizon, the XLFAR tried to fight back, but they were not fighting an army. They were fighting shadows, the beginning of the end. Back on Earth, President Carter received daily reports from Admiral Graves. Every day, more XLFAR ships vanished. Their leaders grew more paranoid. "They're afraid," Graves reported. "They don't know how we're doing this." Carter nodded, her expression unreadable. "Good. Make them suffer." She stood, looking out at the endless stars. The XLFAR thought they had won. They had no idea what kind of enemy they had awakened. The XLFAR Dominion was beginning to crumble from the inside. What had started as a mere annoyance, missing supply ships and silent outposts, had turned into a full-scale phantom war. The once mighty alien empire, feared across the galaxy, was now filled with paranoia and confusion. And the worst part, they still didn't know who was behind it, vanishing without a trace. On the industrial world of Corvallis, a massive XLFAR factory churned out weapons and ships for the Dominion's war efforts. It was one of their most secure locations, protected by planetary shields and 3 elite warrior battalions. It didn't matter. At exactly midnight, the lights across the entire planet flickered. The workers froze, confused, as the factory's automated machines stuttered to a halt. Security officers checked their systems, but their screens only displayed 2 chilling words: "For Horizon." Then the explosions started. One by one, the massive reactors overloaded, sending fireballs into the sky. The shields protecting the planet failed within minutes. In the chaos, cloaked human warships descended from orbit, striking fast and hard. By sunrise, Corvallis was gone. The attack left no survivors. The planet's military garrison had been wiped out without firing a single shot. The factory was nothing more than smoking ruins. The humans did not just want victory. They wanted revenge. Fear spreads across the Dominion. The supreme warlord of the XLFAR, Vakaris the Unbreakable, stood in his war chamber, his claws gripping the stone table. His top generals had gathered before him, their faces twisted in frustration and fear. "Another attack," Vakaris growled. "How?" General Korvac stepped forward, his voice tense. "It was the humans. It has to be." Vakaris narrowed his glowing red eyes. "That is impossible. We crushed their colony. We broke them. They are weak." "No," Korvac said bitterly. "We were wrong. We did not break them. We only made them angry." The warlords looked at each other uneasily. The XLFAR were a race of warriors. They conquered and destroyed without question. Never before had they faced an enemy that fought like this, not in open battle, but from the shadows. Their fleets were being torn apart before they could even retaliate. Their supply chains were disrupted, leaving entire armies starving and desperate. And the worst part, the humans left no evidence, no survivors, only their message, scrawled in blood or burned into the wreckage. For Horizon. The Ghost Fleet strikes again. The UTF's Ghost Fleet, a collection of highly advanced, cloaked warships, moved unseen through Zelfar space. Their mission was simple: destroy the Dominion piece by piece, without warning, without mercy. Captain James Renner, a former officer of Earth's Navy, led one of these deadly fleets. His ship, the U.S. Vengeance, floated in the void, invisible to enemy sensors. His crew worked in silence, watching their next target, a XLFAR warship repair dock orbiting the gas giant Draktul. "Target locked," his weapons officer whispered. Renner's lips curled into a grim smile. "Fire." From the darkness, dozens of torpedoes shot forward, streaking toward the station. The HFY barely had time to react before the first explosion ripped through the facility. Within seconds, the entire station collapsed in on itself, sending debris scattering into space. Hundreds of docked warships were caught in the blast, their hulls splitting apart like fragile glass. By the time Sci-Fi reinforcements arrived, the humans were already gone. No escape, no mercy. The HFY tried to fight back, but their enemies were nowhere and everywhere at once. They sent scout ships into the void, searching for the human fleets. None returned. They doubled security at their bases. It didn't matter. Their outposts still fell in the night. The warlords issued orders for planetary lockdowns, forcing their citizens to stay in their homes. But then, their own leaders started vanishing. One by one, the high-ranking generals of the Dominion disappeared, some from their own warships, others from deep inside their fortresses. Every time, the humans left the same terrifying message. We are coming. The breaking point. In his war chamber, Vacaris slammed his fist into the table, cracking the stone beneath his claws. This is unacceptable. But the warlords had no answers. The HFY, once the galaxy's most feared empire, were now the hunted. Every attempt to strike back had failed. Their fleets were shrinking, their armies starving, their people terrified. For the first time in history, they were losing a war they could not even see. Korvac, his voice barely above a whisper, spoke the words that no HFY had ever dared say before. We need to surrender. The room fell silent. Vacaris bared his fangs, stepping forward with fury in his eyes. You dare suggest we bow to these insects? Korvac didn't flinch. We don't have a choice. If this continues, there will be no HFY left. Vacaris stared at him for a long moment. He wanted to deny it. He wanted to believe they could still win. But deep down, he knew the truth. The humans were not fighting for victory. They were fighting for revenge. And there was no stopping them. The HFY Dominion was on its knees. Once the most feared empire in the galaxy, they were now a broken, desperate race. Their mighty fleets were vanishing into the void, their armies were scattered, and their warlords were hunted like animals. And the humans, they were still coming. A desperate meeting. In the deepest chamber of Drakenval, the HFY homeworld, the last remaining warlords gathered. The Great War Hall, once a place of strength and victory, now felt like a tomb. Supreme Warlord Vacaris, the unbreakable, sat at the head of the stone table, his sharp claws tapping against the surface. Around him, only 7 warlords remained. There used to be 50. The others were dead or missing. We are losing, General Korvac said, his voice heavy with exhaustion. The humans have destroyed our fleets, crippled our supply chains, and eliminated our leaders. Vacaris growled. We are warriors. We do not surrender. Korvac slammed his fist on the table. Then we will die as fools. The room fell into silence. For the first time in HFY history, they had no answer. The final strike. High above Drakenval, the UTF's Ghost Fleet gathered for their last attack. Commander Sarah Voss, the officer who had first witnessed the destruction of Horizon 3, stood on the bridge of the U.S. Retribution. She had waited for this moment. Her voice was cold, steady. Begin the operation. The human fleet moved like shadows, their cloaking technology keeping them hidden as they entered the HFY's most protected space. Then, without warning, they struck. The orbital defense stations bombed into dust. The planetary shield generators hacked and disabled. The ground armies paralyzed by sabotage. For the first time in history, Drakenval was defenseless. Then the real nightmare began. Terror from the sky. The HFY looked up as the sky turned to fire. Human drop pods rained down, landing across the capital city. Thousands of Blackout Squad soldiers emerged, their cybernetic armor glowing under the dark red skies. They moved without fear, without hesitation, and without mercy. The HFY warriors tried to fight back, but their weapons failed. Their defenses collapsed. Their warlords were nowhere to be found. The humans moved through the streets, executing strategic attacks, taking over communication hubs, and destroying every last trace of HFY military command. Then, one by one, the palaces of the warlords burned. The last stand of Vakarus. Inside his fortress, Vakarus the Unbreakable stood with his personal guard, his claws clenched in fury. Outside, explosions shook the city as human soldiers advanced toward his position. A HFY officer stumbled into the chamber. Supreme Warlord, the human's heir. A gunshot rang out. The officer collapsed, a smoking hole in his chest. Behind him, a human soldier stepped forward, holding a plasma rifle. His face was hidden behind a dark helmet, but his voice was filled with cold hatred. For Horizon. Before Vakarus could react, the humans opened fire. His guards fell in seconds, their bodies hitting the stone floor. Vakarus roared, lunging forward, but a single shot tore through his knee, sending him crashing to the ground. As he gasped in pain, he looked up at the humans standing over him. Their eyes burned with the same fury he had once seen in his own warriors. But this was different. This was not war. This was revenge. The end of the Dominion. The news spread across the galaxy within hours. Drakenval had fallen. The Supreme Warlord was dead. And with him, the HFY Dominion ceased to exist. For the first time in centuries, the HFY people were leaderless, broken, and afraid. Earth did not send an announcement. There were no negotiations. There was only silence. The humans had come, and they had taken everything. A message to the galaxy. On Earth, President Elena Carter sat in her office, watching the live footage from Drakenval. Cities burning, warlords executed, Zelfar warriors surrendering in the streets. Admiral Thomas Graves stood beside her. The war is over. Carter nodded, her expression unreadable. Good. She turned to her communications officer. Send a message to every species in the galaxy. The officer nodded. What should it say? Carter leaned forward, her eyes cold. Never touch a human colony again. With the fall of the HFY Dominion, the galaxy found itself in a strange new age. Once, the HFY were the undeniable rulers of the stars, their empire stretching across thousands of systems. Now, they were nothing more than a broken memory. But humanity was different. They had won, but it wasn't a victory celebrated with fireworks or loud cheers. It was a victory of quiet rage, of justice served for those lost in the fire of the HFY's cruelty. A new order. Back on Earth, President Elena Carter stood before the United Terran Federation, UTF, assembly. The room was filled with the faces of humanity's leaders, those who had seen the rise of the HFY and the fall of their empire. The room was silent, waiting for her to speak. The HFY are no more, President Carter said, her voice calm but firm. We have avenged our fallen, but we do not celebrate. What we have done is a warning. She turned, looking out at the window, her eyes fixed on the stars. The galaxy will change now. Others will take the HFY's place, seeking to conquer and control. But we, humanity, have shown that we will never again be weak. We will never again be victims. General Marcus Reed stood up. But what of the other species, Madam President? The ones who stood by and watched us suffer. What should we do with them? Carter's eyes darkened. We will offer them peace, but it will be on our terms. She turned to face the assembly. We will not go to war again unless it is forced upon us. But if anyone dares to cross us, they will learn the same lesson the HFY learned. Humans do not forgive. A new threat on the horizon. In the aftermath of the HFY's fall, other alien species began to grow restless. Some feared humanity's power, others saw an opportunity. One species, the Voltrax, a technologically advanced race of warrior beings, began to test humanity's resolve. At first, it started small. A few skirmishes at the edge of human space, a few stolen resources. Nothing too serious, but enough to make President Carter and her council uneasy. The Voltrax are testing us, Admiral Thomas Graves reported. They believe that with the HFY gone, there is no one left to challenge them. They think we're weak, that we will ignore their actions. Carter's face was unreadable. They are making a grave mistake. She looked out the window again. Prepare for every possible outcome. We will not allow another empire to rise. An unexpected visitor. A few days later, a mysterious ship entered human space. It was large, sleek, and ominous, marked with strange symbols none of the Terran ships had seen before. The ship hailed Earth's orbiting stations, requesting to speak directly with the president. "We've never encountered a fleet like this before," Graves said, turning to his chief strategist, Lieutenant Commander Anna Lee. "What do we know about them?" "Not much," Lee replied, her fingers dancing across the controls. "The Zenthar are ancient. They disappeared from the galaxy centuries ago. Their last known conflict was with the Eldari Collective, and it ended in complete destruction. Since then, they've kept to themselves. Now they've returned, and it's clear they're not here for diplomacy." Graves nodded slowly. "We can't afford to ignore them. We need to make contact. If they're planning something, we need to know before it's too late. A warning." President Carter had been receiving reports about the Zenthar for days, but she knew there was only so much information she could trust. The Zenthar weren't like the HFY or the Voltrax. They didn't announce their intentions with grandiose speeches or overt displays of power. They preferred to operate from the shadows, and that made them even more dangerous. She sat in her war room, surrounded by her top advisors. The lights in the room were dim, and the atmosphere was tense. Everyone knew that humanity was at a crossroads. "We can't afford to let the Zenthar control this region of space," Carter said, her voice steady but filled with resolve. "We need to show them that humanity will not be intimidated." "But what if we're wrong?" General Marcus Reed spoke up, his voice full of concern. "What if they're not here to fight? What if they just want to establish their influence and coexist?" Carter's gaze was unwavering. "We know the signs of aggression, and these Zenthar ships are a sign of war. We can't wait to find out what they want on their terms." She paused, her hand resting on the table. "Prepare the fleet. We'll send a message to the Zenthar. A warning. If they wish to negotiate, they'll have to prove it." The Zenthar's message. The first contact with the Zenthar came sooner than expected. The Zenthar flagship, a colossal ship with glowing lines that pulsed like a heartbeat, entered Terran space. It moved slowly, methodically, almost as if it were testing the limits of humanity's defenses. President Carter stood in front of the communication screen, her breath steady as the Zenthar fleet made their approach. A voice crackled through the comms. It was deep and ancient, like the voice of the universe itself. "Humanity," the voice intoned. "We are the Zenthar Dominion. We have watched your rise. You have defeated the Voltrax, but your power is fragile. It will not be long before the galaxy turns against you, and you will need the strength of the Zenthar to survive." The message was clear. The Zenthar were not offering peace. They were offering control. They were offering themselves as the new rulers of the galaxy. President Carter's response was swift and direct. "We don't need the Zenthar. We don't need anyone to rule us. Humanity will stand on its own. If the Zenthar wish to test our strength, let them come." The battle for control. For days, the Zenthar fleet remained in orbit, their ships watching, waiting, but making no move. The tension was unbearable. It was clear they wanted something, but no one knew exactly what. Finally, the Zenthar made their move. A small, heavily armed ship detached from the flagship and made its way toward Earth. The Terran defense system immediately locked onto it, but before they could fire, the ship sent out a message. "We come in peace," the message said, but the tone was far from reassuring. "This is your final warning. Surrender now, and we will leave your people in peace." Resist, and you will be crushed. General Reed looked at President Carter. This is it, ma'am. They're not here to negotiate. Carter stood tall, her decision clear. No one threatens humanity. Prepare the fleet for battle. The battle begins. The Xanthar fleet moved quickly. Their ships were unlike anything humanity had ever encountered. Massive, sleek, and built for speed, they outmaneuvered the Terran ships with ease. The first few moments of the battle were chaos. Lasers fired, shields flared, and ships danced in the void. But humanity had learned much from their past enemies. The Voltrax, the XLFAR, they had all left their mark. Humanity had become more than just survivors. They were fighters, and now they were showing the galaxy just what they were capable of. The Terran fleet fought fiercely, their ships moving in perfect coordination. With each blow, the Xanthar forces were pushed back, their arrogance shattered. But this was only the beginning. The real war was still ahead. The battle with the Xanthar Dominion had left humanity shaken, but not broken. The skies above Earth had been filled with the flashing lights of lasers, the hum of energy shields, and the deafening roar of warships in combat. Yet when the dust settled, humanity stood victorious, though the victory had come at a great cost. The aftermath. On the surface of Earth, life slowly returned to normal. The sounds of warships docking, the hum of engines, and the bustle of soldiers returning from their missions were still fresh in the air. People had been frightened, unsure of what the future held after the Xanthar's threat had been made clear. But President Elena Carter knew that this was only the beginning of a new chapter for humanity, a chapter where the galaxy would finally understand what humanity had already learned. For too long, the galaxy had underestimated the strength of the human spirit. Now, humanity was a force to be reckoned with, and the Xanthar were just the latest to learn that lesson. I think we've sent a message, Carter said, staring at the holographic map of the galaxy in the war room. We can hold our own. But the real question is, how do we keep peace? How do we make sure this never happens again? General Marcus Reed stood beside her, his arms crossed as he surveyed the battlefield data. The Xanthar have been defeated, but we've shown the galaxy our hand. The question is, who's next? The galaxy's turn. While the Terran forces were celebrating their hard-fought victory, other factions across the galaxy began to take notice. The Salian Collective, having worked closely with humanity, saw the potential for a stronger alliance. Yet they were cautious. Trust was a fragile thing, and many factions feared humanity's growing power. At the other end of the galaxy, the Drakkar Confederation and the Cairn Alliance began to shift their strategies. Both empires had once considered humanity a newcomer in the galactic stage, but now they were beginning to rethink their positions. We cannot ignore humanity anymore, said Warlord Karuk of the Drakkar Confederation during a tense meeting with his council. They've beaten the Voltrax. They've beaten the Xanthar. If we don't act now, they may become the dominant power. The council members exchanged uneasy glances. So, what do we do? One of them asked. Karuk grinned. We test them. Humanity's path forward. On Earth, President Carter's thoughts were just as conflicted. She had led humanity through one of its most challenging times. But the future was uncertain. Peace felt like a distant dream, especially with new threats brewing across the galaxy. The humans had learned that they could no longer remain passive. The galaxy had to be reshaped, not by violence, but by a balance of power. We need to secure our future, Carter said, addressing the Council of Human Leaders. We can't afford to wait for others to act first. We must take a more proactive approach. We will form alliances where we can and stand strong against any threat. If we want peace, we must be ready for war at any moment. Admiral Thomas Graves spoke up. I've been analyzing the patterns of the Drakkar Confederation and the Cairn Alliance. They're both looking for an opening, but they're not acting yet. They're waiting to see if we'll make a mistake. Then we don't make mistakes, Carter said firmly. We stay ahead of them. We show them that humanity will not be intimidated. We'll be leaders, not followers. A call for unity. Humanity's greatest strength had always been its ability to come together in the face of adversity. In the weeks following the Xanthar conflict, President Carter called for a galactic peace summit, inviting all the major factions to discuss the future of the galaxy. It was a bold move, but Carter believed it was the only way to avoid another catastrophic war. The leaders of the Salian Collective, the Drakkar Confederation, the Cairn Alliance, and several smaller factions responded. Each delegation arrived with their own set of demands and concerns, but they all knew one thing: they could no longer ignore humanity. Carter stood at the head of the table, looking out at the leaders who had gathered from across the stars. She had long been known for her strength and determination, and now was no different. "We have been through dark times," she began, her voice resonating across the chamber. "But humanity has proven that we are more than just survivors. We are a force for good, a force for change. The galaxy is on the brink of something new, and if we want peace, we must work together." The leader of the Salian Collective, Eredon, nodded in agreement. "Humanity has earned our respect. We've watched you fight, and we've seen your courage. We can offer you our alliance." The Cairn Alliance representative, Chakran, grunted. "We've never trusted anyone beyond our own people, but humanity has proven to be resilient. I will consider this offer." The Drakkar warlord Carrick remained silent. His eyes were cold, calculating, yet there was a hint of respect hidden beneath his warrior's exterior. He would not make any promises, but Carter knew his mind was already turning over the possibility of a future with humanity at the center. The future unfolds. The summit concluded with a shaky agreement. The factions agreed to lay down their weapons, for now. Humanity's path forward wasn't clear, but the groundwork for peace had been laid. President Carter knew that the galaxy was a far more complicated place than she had ever imagined, but she was ready for it. As the representatives departed, Carter turned to Admiral Graves. "This is just the beginning, Thomas. We've earned respect, but we must keep proving ourselves. The galaxy is watching." Graves nodded. "They are. And they'll see us as a power that won't back down." Carter smiled slightly, her eyes focused on the stars. "The galaxy will never be the same again. Humanity is here to stay."